Hello, bibliophile and book lovers. This is Bertha's Books. It's something for readers, something for writers. And thank you to Lisha Rajdu for recording this and for doing the editing. And something I promised myself I wasn't going to do, but that I thought I'll just swallow my pride and do it and say this to you. If you enjoy this, please subscribe or click the like and send it to others. But if you don't, please don't. Thank you. Okay, so today we're speaking about horrors, and I'm going to be speaking about some books and for the readers and tell you what I think about it, and then tell the writers what I have learned from it and maybe what will help you in your writing. So Gaston's got for us over here, actually it's 4 books. The first book I've given away. First book is Thomas Harris, Red Dragon, and I'll tell you about that. A second one is Mo Hader, Birdman. A third one is A Farewell to Humanity by Stuart Tudor. And Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright. So let's start with the Thomas Harris one, because for me as a reader, certainly it was the one that really I enjoyed by far the most. Please tell me which ones you think you enjoyed or which ones you don't like if you've read any of these 4. So I started actually to read Silence of the Lambs because I'd seen the movie a long time ago, haven't we all? And then I started to read that, but I couldn't help reliving the movie in my mind and Hannibal Lecter and all those famous lines that it sort of distracted me from the book. So I decided, why don't I go and read one of the other ones? Because I knew it was a series of 4 or 5. So I chose Red Dragon, which I think is the one just before Silence of the Lambs. And oh my word, it is good. Oh my word, it is good. If you like mystery, thriller, I wouldn't say it's exactly horror, although there are a lot of subgenres, but I suppose it does fall within that scope. And the writer is just... I think he's just somebody at the top of his craft. You can tell that from the word go. And the way the book is structured, the way it builds suspense and intrigue and working out what's going on, and the frightening parts as well, and the characters in there. Hannibal Lecter, of course, fantastic character. And the detective who's retired and comes back to try and help the FBI sort out this case. So what does it do? It tells the story of a serial killer called the Tooth Fairy. I think in Silence of the Lambs, the serial killer is Buffalo Bill, and Hannibal Lecter helps them work out that case. And in this one, he's helping work out what's going on with the Tooth Fairy, called the Tooth Fairy. And a little bit unlike in many serial killer stories, often in serial killer stories, I find there's a sort of sexual element to it. There's something about... often the murdering of the victims and the sexual element are combined in the serial killer. But that's not the case here. A little bit of it, but not really. It's certainly not a major part. What the story is about is that the Tooth Fairy has suffered tremendous childhood abuse, and he's transforming into a monster, essentially, which is the Red Dragon. And the cover of the book, we speak about covers later as well. The cover of the book it's the picture of a dragon, and I think it's William Blake. Anyway, that's the cover of the book, which I thought is quite good as well. Anyway, the story is about each time Tooth Fairy kills people, it's part of his becoming. And it's just a super book. It's a super book. So the reason I started reading horror for this particular video is because I fancied I might write in my writing future, might write a horror type of book, horror genre novel. I'm not sure I'm going to do that anymore. One thing I was intrigued about, as writers do, that you will enjoy as a reader, is how the perpetrator tracks and thinks and feels and watches his or her victims, and that was one part I was particularly interested in. It's very complex. It's done very, very well. I think this must be at the top of the heap of this kind of genre. It's absolutely super. The one I'll talk about next, Mo Hader. So there's been an awful lot written in online. I'm on Blue Sky and on Facebook, and I follow some other authors and see what they think and feel about horror books. And I came across quite a lot about Mo Hayder's Birdman. So I thought if I was going to learn about horror writing, let me also look at this one. So it tells the story of the detective Jack Caffrey, and certainly in this one there is a link to sexual depravity of an enormous scale, and that adds to the horror aspect of it. To be honest, I was never really frightened while I was reading. There's one part towards the end where the victim says, while the victim is being abused in the most awful way, that I found deeply troubling. It reflected something about human dignity, but that I found particularly troubling. The rest I didn't. Anyway, also at the start of the book, I sort of thought, oh gosh, have I picked something that I'm not going to enjoy? Because it starts off a little bit stereotypical with a sort of slightly gritty policeman who drinks too much and has a failing relationship and so on. And that's sort of a little bit stereotypical, but it soon captured me, and it is a very good book. I think the writer has structured it in extremely well. There are lots of twists and turns. It keeps you guessing. There's a lot going on. It builds intrigue and mystery, and generally it ticks all the boxes. If you're interested in serial killers, serial killer horror, this is going to be your kind of thing. I would strongly recommend it. I would actually also very much expect that, I don't know if it is a movie yet, or maybe it's going to be made into a movie, but gosh, I can see that as a movie. The third one that I got here is Stuart Tudor's Farewell to Humanity. So, gosh, I love this bloke's name, don't you? Stuart Tudor, you know, the House of Tudor and the House of Stuart in English history and the battles between the two. Anyway, and this was the fifth nightmare. So it's definitely part of a series of eight that don't necessarily form a completely overarching story. They stand alone as well. To be honest, I found this more disturbing than the other two books that I've just mentioned. In fact, I found it the most disturbing amongst all four. I suppose you would call it not cosmic horror, cyber horror, dystopian horror. It's that kind of, I suppose dystopian is the best description of it. And I think why it resonated with me so much is because it took me back to when I was a kid. I was 13 years old. I remember at school reading this dystopian young adult fiction. I forget what it was called. I wish I could find it again. I think it was called One World. What was similar in this, and what the author brings across really well, is the sense of isolation and the sense of loneliness, not knowing what's real, what's unreal. It tells the story of a governing entity called Athena. I'll put it that way. I don't want to spoil too much, which has taken over much of the world and infiltrates humans in a controlling kind of way. And those humans that are not controlled or have managed to escape are very isolated. So the streets are empty, the cities are eerie and quiet, and the ones who aren't affected are not sure if the ones that they are engaging with are infected with Athena and how that's going to affect them. So I think it's the isolation that really resonated with me. I enjoyed it very much. It's extremely short. I think it's novelette length, even a bit shorter than a novel. There are some issues in it that are distracting. A sort of a technical style, perhaps, or I think there was perhaps an author oversight of some technical issues that I found quite distracting. But nevertheless, I don't want that to distract you. You might not be troubled by that at all. So yeah, I would recommend it. In fact, I would recommend those three books completely. And then Exquisite Corpse, Poppy C. Bright, which is the story of actually two serial killers. One is a cannibal serial killer, and the other one is just a sadist. And it tells the story of how these two serial killers eventually meet up to explore their fantasies and depravities together, if you like. So those are the two main characters, and it takes place in well, the two main characters meet up in one in England and one in New Orleans in the United States. And gosh, New Orleans sounds wonderful. It's one of the parts I haven't visited in the US. I'd love to go there again when everything's a lot calmer. But so they meet up and they eventually identify a character that they want to kidnap and have their way with. There's another character in there, Lucas, who is the ex-lover of the boy. Well, it's not a boy. I think he's 18 or 20, who is called Tran. I'm not sure. He's a Vietnamese boy or East Asian boy. I think he's Vietnamese, and that might be his name, or maybe there's something about transsexual in there as well. I'm not sure. It deals a lot with the seedier side of gay life. I think might not necessarily be seedier. No, not seedier. Might be mistaken. Forgive me, but it's a part of the gay culture, perhaps the darker side of it, perhaps. So I was really looking forward to this. I'm sorry to say it's not my cup of tea. It's not the horror. Yeah, it's definitely not the horror, and that didn't trouble me at all. In fact, in fact, so what I should say as well is that this really is just my point of view. There've been a lot written about it by other authors and people on Blue Sky and so on, and a lot of people think it's fantastic. So it really is only my view of this. In fact, but I can say, perhaps I'll tell under the writer's part, I feel like I need to justify why I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it that much that I didn't even finish it. So I think one of the things that spoilt it for me was the prologue. I felt like it told me a lot about how I should interpret the book, which I didn't enjoy. In fact, if you're a writer or a reader, it would be interesting to know what you think about prologues. I know that publishers often are really not keen on prologues. You've really got to justify why you want to keep it in. So those are the four books. I'd love to know which ones you found most interesting, best, if you can use that term. Which ones you didn't like. I'd really be interested to know about that. Okay, coming on. So something for writers. These are all very, very different styles. I mean, Thomas Harris, I think when I compare with the others, are really in a class of his own at the moment. I don't know if he's still around. I think because Red Dragon's quite a bit older than I think these. I think so. Maybe Exquisite Corpse is also quite old. But anyway, it's just of a different class, I think, as a writer. And if I wanted to write horror and serial killer stuff, that's the kind of book I would want to read a lot of, because it's really, really, really good. Couldn't fault it at all. Mo Hayder's Birdman is also very good. As I said last time, if you're a writer, I don't know how you feel about getting endorsements and so on your books. I mean, I said to readers in the last video, just take it as marketing. It's just marketing. I know there's a trend amongst some types of authors to not want to put any of these endorsements on. And I really can see why. I think I'm very grateful for the author who wrote an endorsement on my first book. You're wanting sort of validation. So I think it's good to if you get a well-known author or reviewer to say something good about it, that's always helpful. But as a writer, I think in the future, I probably won't ask anybody, or even if somebody volunteers, like I did in the first case, probably not do it on. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm just going through a phase. If you're a writer, love to know what you think about that. I realize we want to sell books, so maybe that is important. Anyway, but the reason I mention it as well is because, the Daily Telegraph, better than Silence of the Lambs, really? It'll scare the hell out of you. Elle magazine. It didn't scare me at all, except for that one thing that the victim says at the end. Don't want to knock it. It's a great book. If you want to learn about writing technique and constructing technically very good horror serial killer stories, you could do a lot worse than this, I can tell you. This one here, Stuart Tudor's book, it's also not horror as in classic like Silence of the Lambs, say, or something like that. It really is far more a psychological horror. And I think the reason I did enjoy the psychological part is because there is sort of a feeling about the character here that you get to that I got to know a lot more than I perhaps did in the others. So if you're wanting craft and skill and constructing horror stories and serial killers, definitely I think Thomas Harris, just for all reasons, is best in all his ways. Matt Haig is also a very well crafted one. And for psychological, I found this one actually perhaps the most disturbing. Oh, the two things I wanted to mention on here as well is the thing about AI. I noticed that the author on Farewell to Humanity, I love the title, by the way, it says here artificial intelligence free. And the cover is an interesting story. Covers are really interesting. I like the covers of all of these, actually, but I wrote to the author of this and have met him several times and actually bought this book directly from him. And the cover is a graphic of a painting that he has. So I think that he particularly commissioned for the series of books. I suppose for Red Dragon, that was even around the time, certainly before AI. So that couldn't have been AI generated. I don't know about the other two, and if they are, they are. And I know there's a big backlash against it. I'm not mad about anything AI either. I've got to put my cards on the table. I don't think I would use it in any significant way at all. But it was nice to see that a few people take quite a strong feeling about that as well. These are the first three books. One thing I would also like to mention, which I think can be a weakness of this book as well, although I think the first time I read it, I misinterpreted it. As a writer, always be careful of putting dreams in your books, is my feeling. I mean, I'm sure they're great books with dreams in them, especially at the end. And then you wonder, was all the story real? But having said that, and having read this book for the second time, I was particularly sleep deprived the first time I read it. The dream is used as a subversion, actually, because I don't want to give a spoiler away, but something happens to the protagonist. You're not sure if the dream was real or not, and it's a subversion. So I don't think the same criticism holds for this book, but I'm mentioning it because generally I think reviewers and other authors and so on are cautious about using dream reveals or the whole book that you read was actually just a dream. The last one, as I say, I wish I could have. I was actually really looking forward to this, so maybe that also what adds to my disappointment. As I say, really only my sentiments, might not be yours at all. And the author, I think I'll refer to the author as they. I think it's they, but they clearly speak a bit, or in fact, quite frankly, speak something about their personal sentiments in the prologue and rages a little against the treatment of gay people in the United States during the AIDS pandemic. Of course, I'm sure, rightfully so. I've no doubt a lot of what is said is true. It's visceral. There was an awful lot of injustice. But the part that troubled me a lot about the prologue was the author, they specifically say that they want to create a parallel between the HIV virus and a serial killer and put that into a story. So it feels very contrived. And then the other thing, perhaps I should say, is writers writing about writers. Be careful. I'd very be careful about that. Not saying it's not possible. I mean, think of Misery, Stephen King, and the one with Jack Nicholson where he gets stuck in the Overlook Hotel. Name escapes me for the moment. But I mean, those two books are just tremendous. And the movies were tremendous when I saw them afterwards. Those are about two writers. But the writer in here feels like it could very well be the author. And that every time the writer speaks or writes, I didn't like it. But as I say, that might just be for me. Perhaps I should say a word about transgressive fiction or transgressive horror. I think the first three that I mentioned would just be classified as horror of different subgenres. Exquisite Corpse, I suppose, is more transgressive. And transgressive, also maybe for my sake, transgressive horror is not really my thing. But it is a curious thing as to what people like about it, especially because often it's mixed with some kind of sexual element, and I do find curious as to what people find interesting to read about that. If that's what you like, please let me know. I've asked a few horror writers about that, and they speak about gaining empathy for others and so on. But how transgressive must it be for you to gain empathy? I don't know. It's just not. It's just something that I'm aware of. I don't really spend much time reading, although I'm not opposed to it. I do see some of the attraction to exploring that kind of fiction. I hope you enjoyed this. I really am enjoying telling you about the books that I've read and what you might think of it as a reader, and also telling you about how I interpret the writing and how the writing helps me sometimes about some of the techniques, what works, what doesn't work. And I would be delighted to hear what you think about that. So until the next time, when I've already got lined up Madame Bovary, which we're going to be talking about, and that will be what the whole video is about. So until then, look after yourself and happy reading.